The late summer sun hung low on the horizon, spilling gold across the rows of corn that swayed gently in the evening breeze. My little field stretched behind the house, no more than a few dozen rows, but it was mine. I had worked the soil with my own hands, planted each seed, watered and weeded through the long season. Now the stalks were tall and strong, their tassels brushing against the sky like banners of victory. For me, this harvest wasn't just food. It was pride. It was proof that even in a manicured suburban neighborhood ruled by a homeowners association, something real could grow. Something that wasn't just hedges cut to regulation height or flowers chosen from an HOA approved list. But of course, not everyone saw it that way. Karen didn't. Karen, queen of the HOA board, master of complaint letters, neighborhood tyrant. She was the kind of person who treated power like perfume. She poured it on until everyone else suffocated. Every week, she found something wrong with my property. My mailbox was too rustic. My lawn chairs weren't the right color. My cornfield, my pride, was, according to her, an eyesore. She had told me this to my face more than once. "This is a neighborhood, not a farm," she would sneer, adjusting her oversized sunglasses while sipping on some sparkling water she carried like a prop. "Your plants don't fit the aesthetic." I had learned to ignore her. But ignoring Karen didn't make her go away. If anything, it made her louder. Letters slipped under my door, fines threatened at HOA meetings, neighbors pressured to vote against agricultural clutter. But I stood firm. I wasn't breaking any laws. And deep down, I knew my corn bothered her for reasons that had nothing to do with rules. It was because she couldn't control it. That night, as the sun dipped lower and the shadows stretched long, I noticed movement near the field. At first, I thought it was a raccoon or maybe one of the kids cutting through the yard. But when I stepped onto the porch, I saw her. Karen. She was pacing at the edge of the corn, her neat cardigan glowing faintly in the twilight. Her blonde bob caught the last streak of light. And in her hand, she held something small and silver. A lighter. At first, I froze. My brain scrambled for excuses. Maybe she was smoking, though I'd never seen her with a cigarette. Maybe she was just fidgeting. But then, with a deliberate crouch, she flicked the lighter, and a small flame danced in the dark. I gasped. Before I could shout, she pressed the flame to a brittle, dry husk of corn stalk. The hiss came first, like a snake waking from slumber. Then the crackle, sharp and hungry. The stalk flared, and in a heartbeat the fire spread, licking upward, feeding greedily on the summer dry crop. "Karen!" I roared, sprinting off the porch. "What the hell are you doing?" Her head snapped toward me, eyes wide, mouth caught between guilt and rage. And then, she ran. She didn't try to stamp it out. She didn't shout for help. She bolted like a thief, scurrying across the lawn toward her pristine White House, leaving the flames behind her like dirty laundry tossed in someone else's room. I skidded to the edge of the fire, grabbing the garden hose I had coiled nearby. I twisted the nozzle open, and water sprayed, but it was pitiful, barely a stream compared to the raging tongues of fire climbing higher and higher. The wind betrayed me. It carried the flames deeper into the rows, turning one small blaze into a monster. The crackling grew louder, a roar that filled my chest with dread. Smoke stung my eyes, and the smell of burning husks clawed at my throat. I fought the fire with the hose, but every stalk I doused was already blackened, collapsing under its own weight. My field, my hard work, my harvest, was dying in front of me. Panic clawed at my ribs. I couldn't stop it. Not like this. My phone was in my pocket. With trembling fingers, I yanked it out, pressed 911, and shouted my address to the operator. My voice was ragged, my lungs burning with every breath. "There's a fire in my field. Send someone, please." As soon as I hung up, I looked back toward Karen's house. Her porch light was on. Through the window, I could see her silhouette darting frantically, pacing, maybe watching, maybe panicking. Good, I thought bitterly. She should panic. The fire raged on. The orange glow lit the neighborhood, and I could already hear neighbors stepping outside, their voices sharp with fear and confusion. Someone shouted, "Call the fire department." Someone else yelled, "Is it spreading?" And above it all, I stood in the smoke, gripping my useless hose, watching the destruction Karen had caused. My chest ached with fury. She had complained for months, whined about property values, sneered at my harvest. And now she had gone further than anyone could imagine. She hadn't just tried to break my spirit. She had tried to erase my work. But she wasn't going to get away with it. The fire was alive, but so was the truth. I had seen her. I knew. And when the sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder with each passing second, I realized something. This wasn't just the end of my harvest. This was the beginning of her downfall. The wail of sirens sliced through the night air, growing louder with every second. Blue and red lights bounced across the neighborhood, painting Karen's perfect white fences in chaotic flashes. Neighbors poured out of their homes, phones in hand, whispering, gasping, filming. I stood in the street, chest heaving, eyes watering from smoke. The fire had already devoured nearly half my cornfield. The firefighters rushed in, shouting orders, dragging hoses as thick as my arms. Jets of water arced across the flames, hissing, steaming, battling the inferno that my neighbor had unleashed. But my eyes weren't on the fire anymore. They were on Karen. She stood frozen at the edge of her driveway, arms wrapped around herself, her lips trembling as if she had just realized that fire wasn't a petty HOA complaint, it was a crime. One firefighter turned to me. "Did you see how it started?" His voice was urgent but calm, trained for chaos. "Yes," I said without hesitation. My throat burned from the smoke, but anger gave me strength. My neighbor lit it. I saw her. She used a lighter. His eyes flicked toward Karen, who immediately shook her head. "That's a lie," she snapped, her voice high-pitched and brittle. "He's blaming me because I've complained about that ridiculous cornfield for months." Several heads turned toward her. She looked around, realizing too late that her reputation had already poisoned the air long before the smoke did. Another firefighter stepped forward, his helmet glinting under the flashing lights. "Ma'am, we need you to stay right here while we contain the fire. Don't move." Karen's hands twitched. Her perfect manicure glistened in the streetlight as she fidgeted. She looked like a child who'd been caught with chocolate on her face, trying desperately to deny she'd been in the cookie jar. The hoses roared. Water smashed into the flames, bending them backward until smoke rolled heavy across the street. I coughed, pulling my shirt over my mouth. The bitter stench of burned corn filled the air, a smell that felt like betrayal itself. A neighbor's voice rang out from the crowd. "I saw her." It was Mrs. Peters, the sweet old lady who lived across the street. Her voice shook but carried. "I saw Karen crouching at the edge of the cornfield with something in her hand. Then the fire started." Karen spun toward her, eyes wild. You must have seen wrong. It was dark." "No," Mrs. Peters said firmly, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I know what I saw." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Phones tilted upward, recording everything. Karen's face drained of color. The HOA's queen bee was being stung by her own swarm. A firefighter with a clipboard stepped up, pulling out a small notepad. "Ma'am, we'll need to ask you some questions. Do you have any source of fire on you, matches, lighters?" Karen took a step back, shaking her head violently. "No. I don't smoke, I don't." But then, as if summoned by fate, something slipped from the pocket of her cardigan and clattered onto the concrete. A lighter. The crowd gasped as one. My stomach twisted. For a moment, the fire seemed quieter than the silence that followed. Karen scrambled, trying to snatch it up, but the firefighter was faster. He bent down, picked it up, and held it high in his gloved hand. "This yours?" I borrowed it," she stammered, her voice cracking. From someone. It's not mine." No one believed her. Not anymore. The firefighters continued their battle, water pounding against fire until the flames shrank and hissed. What was once my pride, the rows of corn I had tended every morning and every evening, was now a blackened graveyard of ash and broken stalks. I swallowed hard, trying not to let the sting in my eyes break me down. This wasn't just about crops. It was about trust. About the right to build something of your own, even under the shadow of a tyrannical HOA. Another firefighter walked over. "We've got the blaze under control. It won't spread to the houses." He gave me a sympathetic nod. "I'm sorry about your field. We'll file a full incident report. The authorities will handle the rest." I nodded numbly. My chest felt heavy, but a strange, cold satisfaction curled in my gut. Karen wasn't untouchable anymore. She was trembling, her arms folded so tightly around herself it looked painful. The neighbors weren't looking at me, or the fire, or even the charred field. They were all staring at her. The HOA's queen had been dethroned. One by one, neighbors whispered among themselves. Unbelievable. After all that fuss about the rules, she could have burned the whole street down. Karen finally snapped. "Stop looking at me like that," she screamed, her voice shrill, hysterical. "This isn't my fault. He provoked me. He planted that awful field just to spite me. You all hated it too, admit it." But no one admitted anything. No one stood by her side. The firefighter with the notepad calmly spoke into his radio. A few moments later, 2 police cruisers pulled up. The sight of their flashing lights made Karen stumble backward, her bravado collapsing into raw fear. Wait, no," she pleaded, her voice cracking as the officers approached. "You can't arrest me. I'm on the HOA board. I make the rules." The officer's tone was flat, professional, unmoved. "Ma'am, you don't make the law. They read her rights as she stood there, trembling, surrounded by the ashes of her arrogance. The neighbors filmed, the firefighters watched, and I stood silently, the weight of justice settling over me. For years, Karen had bullied, threatened, and terrorized everyone with her power on the HOA. But fire doesn't bow to titles. Fire doesn't care about rules written in newsletters. Fire only obeys truth. And the truth was in ashes, smoke, and the lighter in her pocket. As the officers guided her into the cruiser, Karen's eyes darted to me. There was no more arrogance there, no superiority. Only fear. Only regret. For the first time since I had moved into this neighborhood, I felt free. The crowd began to disperse, the firefighters packed up their hoses, and the last of the smoke curled into the night sky. My cornfield was gone, but something greater had been planted in its place, a community that no longer bowed to Karen's tyranny. And as the police car pulled away, carrying her into the darkness, I whispered to myself. Harvest lost. Justice gained.